My name is Nora Whitmore, and I was 40 years old when my older sister decided to make me the joke of our Christmas dinner. By then, I had already learned not to react when my family tried to embarrass me, but that night was different. We were sitting around my mother's long dining table, surrounded by candles, expensive plates, roasted turkey, sparkling wine, and the kind of Christmas decorations my mother loved because they made the family look perfect in photographs. Almost everyone was there: my parents, my sister, her husband, several cousins, 2 family friends, and a few people connected to the family business. I had barely touched my dinner when my sister, Sabrina Whitmore, lifted her champagne glass and smiled at me. I knew that smile. "Everyone," she said, tapping her glass with a spoon, "before we start dessert, I think we should celebrate Nora." Several people turned toward me. I smiled politely. "Celebrate me for what?" I asked. Sabrina laughed. "For surviving another year as the family's most successful single woman." A few people laughed. My mother, Margaret Whitmore, covered her mouth and chuckled. My father, Thomas Whitmore, looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Sabrina leaned closer to me. 40 years old and still unmarried. "Nora, honestly, how do you do Christmas alone every year?" More laughter followed. My face felt warm, but I refused to give them the reaction they wanted. I picked up my glass, took a slow sip, and placed it back on the table. "Don't worry about me," I said calmly. Sabrina grinned. "Oh, we're not worried. We're just wondering when you'll finally meet someone." My mother added, "Sabrina is only teasing you, sweetheart." I looked around the table. Of course she is. Then I smiled. "Actually, there is something I should tell all of you." Sabrina raised an eyebrow. "What?" I took a breath. "I've been married for nearly 2 years." The laughter stopped instantly. My mother's smile disappeared. My father stared at me. Sabrina's champagne glass froze halfway to her mouth. "What did you just say?" she whispered. I looked directly at her. I said I'm married. And before anyone asks, yes, you know my husband's name. For several seconds, nobody moved. The silence was so complete that I could hear the soft ticking of the antique clock hanging on the wall behind my father's chair. Sabrina slowly lowered her glass. "You're lying," she said. I almost laughed because that was exactly what she expected me to do whenever I refused to play along with her. Why would I lie about being married? I asked. She looked at my mother, hoping she would rescue her. Instead, Mom stared at me with wide eyes. "Nora," she said quietly, "what are you talking about?" I reached beneath the collar of my dress and pulled out the thin gold chain I always wore around my neck. At the end of it was my wedding ring. I had stopped wearing it on my finger around my family because I did not want endless questions about my private life. I placed it on the table. My father leaned forward. "You got married?" "Yes, Dad." "When?" 22 months ago." Sabrina shook her head. "This is impossible. Who is he?" I looked toward the thick folder sitting beside my mother's plate. It was the redevelopment proposal for the Riverside Civic Exchange, a huge old railway terminal our family business wanted to transform into a cultural center, hotel, and performance hall. They had spent almost 6 months preparing that proposal because they believed one particular investment company could save them from their growing financial problems. "You already know who he is," I said. Sabrina frowned. "What are you talking about?" I pointed at the folder. "Your favorite potential investor, the man you've been trying to impress since June." My mother suddenly looked frightened. "Nora," I said his name slowly. "Elliot Mercer." My father's face changed immediately. Sabrina stared at me as if I had just spoken another language. "Elliot Mercer," she repeated. "The founder of Mercer Renewal Group?" "Yes." "You're married to him?" "Yes." Sabrina pushed her chair back. "No, you cannot be serious." I looked at her. "I'm very serious," my mother whispered. "Why didn't you tell us?" I gave her a tired smile. "Because every private thing I ever shared with this family eventually became public entertainment. My words made her look away, but there was something else inside that folder, something far more serious than my secret marriage. And that's not even the biggest problem, I said. Your proposal contains my professional work, my private research, and a signature I never gave you permission to use. My father immediately pulled the folder toward himself. What do you mean, your signature? He asked. I reached across the table and opened the proposal to the section I had already marked on my phone. Page 18. My father turned the pages. This acoustic assessment, he began. It's mine, I said. Sabrina crossed her arms. You helped us with the project. I answered Dad's questions about the building. I never gave you permission to use my report. She rolled her eyes. Nora, you're acting like we stole state secrets. I looked at her. You removed my company logo, removed the copyright notice, used my calculations, and listed me as the project's senior acoustic consultant. Sabrina's face became tense. You were going to help us anyway. That doesn't give you permission to sign my name. My father looked at the document again. His voice became serious. Sabrina, what signature is she talking about? My sister did not answer. My mother quickly interrupted. Thomas, this is Christmas. We can discuss paperwork tomorrow. No, I said. Tomorrow is too late. Mercer Renewal contacted my office 3 days ago. Everyone became silent again. Their legal team wanted to confirm whether I had officially joined Whitmore Heritage Group as a consultant. I told them I had not. My father's eyes widened. They contacted you? Yes. I looked at Sabrina. They also asked why my copyrighted material was included in an investor proposal without my written permission. Sabrina stood up. You went behind our backs and spoke to Elliot? I didn't know Elliot was reviewing your proposal until his legal team contacted me. My mother shook her head. Nora, please. You know how much this project means to us. I know. Then why are you making this difficult? I looked at her for a long moment. I'm not making anything difficult. I'm refusing to lie. My father slowly turned toward Sabrina. Did you tell Mercer that Nora was part of the project? Sabrina hesitated. She was supposed to be. That wasn't my question. I thought she would agree. You thought? I repeated. You don't get to think on my behalf. Sabrina's face hardened. You've always been difficult. I laughed softly. And you've always been forgiven. My mother frowned. That's enough. No, Mom. It isn't enough anymore. I picked up the proposal and held it against my chest. For years, you told me Sabrina was just confident. You called her cruelty a joke. You called her taking my work teamwork. You called my boundaries selfishness. Tonight, she tried to make me feel ashamed because she thought I was single, but she accidentally gave me the perfect moment to tell the truth. My father looked exhausted. Nora, why did you hide your marriage from us? That question hurt more than Sabrina's joke because I had secretly hoped he would understand without asking. I looked at him and said, because I wanted one thing in my life that belonged only to me. He lowered his eyes. Your mother and Sabrina have always shared everything with you. Exactly, I replied. They shared things that were never theirs to share. My mother sighed. We are your family. I know. That's why it hurt more. I told them about Elliot. I told them how we had met 3 years earlier while working on the restoration of an old theater in Kansas City. He had been the structural engineer leading the project, and I had been hired to solve the building's terrible sound problems. Our first meeting had not been romantic at all. In fact, we had argued for almost an hour. Your ceiling plan won't work, I had told him. He had looked at me and said, neither will your acoustic plan. I had stared at him. Are you challenging me? He smiled. I'm asking you to prove me wrong. The next morning, he arrived at the site carrying 2 coffees. One for you, he said. Why? I asked. Because I was wrong about one part of your design. I laughed. Only one part. Don't get greedy. That was how it began. We became friends first, then something deeper. Elliot never treated my career like a hobby. He never called my work decorating with sound, the way my mother had. He understood that I spent years studying how buildings carried sound, how walls absorb vibration, how theaters could be designed so a person sitting at the back could hear a whisper from the stage. He respected the work I had built for myself. When he proposed, he did not ask me to become Mrs. Mercer and disappear behind his name. He said, "I want you beside me, not behind me." We married quietly in a restored city library with only 12 guests. There was no giant family event, no expensive decorations, and no opportunity for Sabrina to turn the wedding into a competition. I wore a simple cream dress. Elliot wore a dark suit. We exchanged vows beneath an old stained glass window. When I told my family about that night, my mother began crying. "You should have invited us." I looked at her sadly. I wanted to, but every time I imagined telling you, I remembered how you had treated my happiness before. Sabrina whispered, "So you chose strangers over your family?" I shook my head. "No, I chose peace over humiliation." Sabrina suddenly pointed at the proposal. "Fine, you married Elliot. Congratulations. But what does that have to do with our company?" I looked at her. Everything. I opened the folder again and showed them the pages containing my work. The Riverside project needs an acoustic plan because the performance hall is being built inside an old railway terminal. I created this exact analysis 2 years ago when a nonprofit group was considering the building. The project never happened, but my research remained protected. My father read the pages carefully. "You gave me a copy," he said. "Yes. You asked me for advice. I didn't know Sabrina used it." "Maybe you didn't," I said, "but someone did." Sabrina stepped closer. "You're making this sound worse than it is." I looked directly into her eyes. "Then answer one question. Did you sign my name?" She said nothing. "Sabrina." My mother stood up. "Nora, let's not do this in front of everyone." "Why not?" She made me the entertainment in front of everyone. Nobody laughed this time. One of my cousins quietly put his phone away. Sabrina finally said, "I signed it because we needed the proposal finished." My father's face went pale. "You signed Nora's name?" "I thought she would approve it." I turned to my mother. "And you knew?" "I knew she had used your work," Mom admitted quietly. My chest tightened. "You knew?" "I didn't know she had signed your name." I shook my head. "But you knew my work was in the proposal." "I thought you would be happy to help save the company." "You never asked me." My father closed the folder. "Sabrina, what else is in here?" She looked frightened now. "Nothing." I reached for another document. "Then why does this page list me as a family guarantor?" My father grabbed the paper. His expression changed immediately. "What is this?" Sabrina began speaking quickly. "It was only a preliminary document." "My name is on it," I said. "I never agreed to guarantee anything." My mother stepped toward me. "Nora, please listen. The company is struggling. We have loans. We have employees depending on us. If the Riverside project goes through, everything could change." I looked around the table at the people who had laughed at me minutes earlier. Then I looked at the woman who had spent years making me feel like I was less important because I had refused to live the life she expected. "Mom," I said quietly, "you should have thought about saving the company before you started using my name to protect it." I picked up my coat. Sabrina moved toward the door. "Where are you going?" she demanded. I looked at her and answered, "Home. To my husband. To the life you all thought I didn't have." Then I opened the door and stepped into the cold Christmas night, knowing that the secret I had protected for nearly 2 years was finally out, and that the truth inside that folder was about to change my family forever. The moment I stepped outside, the cold December air hit my face, but somehow it felt easier to breathe outside that house than it had felt sitting at my mother's table. I walked down the front steps without looking back, but I could hear Sabrina behind me. "Nora, wait," she called. I kept walking. "Nora." This time her voice sounded different. There was no laughter in it, no confidence, no teasing. There was fear. I stopped beside the gate and turned around. Sabrina stood in the doorway wearing the same dress she had proudly worn to dinner, but now she looked completely lost. "What?" I asked. She walked toward me. "You can't just leave like this." I gave her a tired smile. "I just did. The company is going to collapse. That's not my responsibility." She stared at me. "It is your family. Being family does not mean I have to accept everything you do." She lowered her voice. "If Mercer Renewal walks away, we could lose everything. Then you should have thought about that before using my name." I didn't think it would become this serious. I looked at her. "You signed a document pretending to be me." She swallowed hard. "I was under pressure." "So was I. The difference is that I didn't commit fraud to escape it." She flinched at the word. "Please don't call it fraud." "What should I call it?" I asked. "A Christmas mistake?" She looked away. For the first time in years, Sabrina had nothing clever to say. Then my phone rang. It was Elliot. I answered. "Hello." "Are you outside?" he asked. "Yes." "Do you want me to come inside?" I looked at Sabrina standing a few feet away. "No, I'm coming to you." His voice softened. "All right, I'm parked around the corner." I ended the call. Sabrina stared at me. "He's here." "Yes." "He came to get you?" "Of course." She shook her head slowly. "You really built a whole life without telling us." "I built a life because I knew I couldn't depend on you to respect it." She looked hurt. "Did you ever love us?" That question almost broke me. "I loved you enough to keep hoping you'd change," I answered. "But I finally learned that love doesn't mean giving people unlimited access to hurt you." I turned away. "Nora," she called one last time. "What happens now?" I looked over my shoulder. Now the truth handles what I spent years trying to fix for everyone else. Then I walked toward Elliot's car. He stepped out before I reached it, opened the passenger door, and waited. When I got inside, he did not ask me to explain everything. He simply reached for my hand. "You did the right thing," he said. I looked through the window at my family's house. "It doesn't feel right." He squeezed my fingers. "Doing the right thing doesn't always feel good." I leaned against the seat and finally allowed myself to cry. The following weeks changed everything. Mercer Renewal Group formally suspended negotiations with Whitmore Heritage Group after its legal team completed a review of the Riverside proposal. The report identified several serious problems, including the unauthorized use of my professional work, the false representation of my involvement, and financial information that did not match the company's records. My father's first reaction was anger, but not at me. He called me one morning and said, "Nora, I found something else." I was sitting in Elliot's kitchen, drinking coffee, when I answered. "What did you find?" "There are 3 other documents with your name on them." I closed my eyes. "Dad, I know." His voice cracked. "I should have checked." "You trusted Sabrina." "I trusted the wrong person because she was my daughter." I was quiet. Then he said something I had never expected. "And because you were always the responsible one, I assumed you'd protect us if something went wrong." I swallowed. That's exactly what everyone assumed. The company eventually entered restructuring. Some employees were terrified, and I felt terrible for them because they had not created the problems. Elliot and I agreed that Mercer Renewal would not simply buy the company and hand me control. Instead, he helped connect the workers with an independent restoration group that could purchase the useful parts of the business through a transparent process. My father stepped away from management. My mother finally stopped defending Sabrina publicly. As for Sabrina, the consequences were painful. She had to admit that she had used my work without permission and had signed my name. She lost her position and faced an investigation into the documents she had submitted. One evening, she called me. "Nora," she said through tears, "I don't know what to do. You need to tell the truth." "I've already told them." "Then keep telling it." She cried quietly. "Do you hate me?" I closed my eyes. "No, then why won't you save me?" Her question broke my heart because it showed that she still believed saving her was my responsibility. Because, Sabrina, saving you from the consequences of your actions is not the same as loving you. She was silent. "I thought you were jealous of me," she finally whispered. "I was jealous of you," I admitted. "Not because you were better. I was jealous because you could walk into a room and be celebrated for things I had worked hard to achieve." She started crying again. "I didn't know you felt that way." "You didn't ask." "I'm sorry." I took a slow breath. "I believe you're sorry. But forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to how it was." "What does it mean?" she asked. "It means I can stop carrying anger without giving you permission to hurt me again." Months passed. My mother eventually came to my office. She sat across from me and looked at the drawings covering my desk. "I used to think your work was just about speakers," she said. I smiled sadly. "I know." She touched one of the plans. "I was wrong." "Yes, you were." She nodded. "I also realized something else. We made you feel like you had to hide your happiness from us." I looked at her. "That is why I didn't tell you about Elliot." She began to cry. "I'm sorry." This time, I did not immediately say it was okay. I simply reached across the desk and held her hand. "I hear you, Mom." And for the first time, she understood that hearing an apology did not mean I was required to erase the past. A year after that Christmas dinner, I stood inside the same restored library where Elliot and I had exchanged our wedding vows. But everything felt different. The old wooden shelves were still there, the stained glass windows still filled the room with soft morning light, and the long reading table still carried the marks of generations of use. But I was no longer the woman who believed she needed her family's approval before she could be happy. Elliot stood beside me, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Are you nervous?" he asked. I smiled. "A little." "Why?" "My parents are coming." He raised an eyebrow. "You invited them." "I know." "Then why are you nervous?" I looked at the empty chairs. "Because forgiveness is complicated." He nodded. "So is family. My father arrived first." He hugged me and whispered, "I'm proud of you." My mother came a few minutes later. She looked at Elliot and said, "I owe you an apology." Elliot smiled politely. "You owe Nora one first." My mother looked at me. "He's right." I laughed softly. "He's usually right." Later that afternoon, my father told me that the employees who had taken over part of the old company were doing well. They had kept several of the craftsmen, restored 2 historic buildings, and won a major public contract without using the Whitmore name. "They're doing better without us controlling everything," he admitted. "Maybe that's the lesson we needed." Sabrina did not attend that gathering. We were not completely reconciled, but she had started rebuilding her career on her own. She sent me a letter every few months, and I read each one. Some were apologies. Some were updates about her life. None demanded forgiveness. That mattered. My mother also changed slowly. When relatives asked why I had kept my marriage secret, she no longer said I was selfish or secretive. She simply said, "Because we gave her reasons not to trust us." Those words meant more to me than any dramatic apology could have. That evening, Elliot and I walked through the library together. He looked down at my hand. "You're wearing it." I looked at my wedding ring and smiled. "I don't need to hide it anymore." He kissed my forehead. "You never needed to." I thought about Sabrina's Christmas joke, the laughter around that table, and the way everyone had assumed that being 40 and unmarried meant I was lonely. They had been wrong. I had been married for nearly 2 years. I had a career I loved. I had friends who respected me. I had a husband who never asked me to become smaller so he could feel bigger. Most importantly, I had finally learned that peace was not something my family could give or take away. It was something I had the right to protect. Looking back, I realized that the greatest victory was not exposing Sabrina, losing the family company, or revealing that I was married to the very investor they had been chasing. My greatest victory was refusing to become the person they expected me to be. I had spent years solving their problems, protecting their reputation, forgiving their insults, and accepting their excuses. That Christmas night, I finally stopped. And sometimes, the strongest response to people who constantly make you feel small is not revenge. It is building a life so honest, peaceful, and complete that you no longer need their approval to know your worth. If someone keeps calling your pain a joke, pay attention to how often they expect you to laugh. And if protecting your peace means walking away from people you love, remember this: leaving disrespect behind is not always the end of a family. Sometimes it is the beginning of finding yourself. Like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this, and let us know where you are watching from under the comment section.